Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Waystation. I'm your host, Rebecca Darren-Ellis, nobody in particular, and also just like you. In every episode of the Waystation, we explore first-person stories, each told on a common theme, but from vastly diverse perspectives. We'll introduce you to everyday, real people whose lives are seemingly different than yours. Or are they? Perhaps through these stories, you may find that you and me and he and she and they and them are more alike than we're willing to admit. First, a quick shout out to my friends at Pioneering Collective. This podcast is powered by Pioneering Collective, an executive thought leadership firm combining personal PR, coaching, and networking to transform hard-earned wisdom into heavyweight impact. Learn more at pioneeringcollective.com. Our first theme that we're going to be discussing is one that's very near and dear to my heart, which is mental health.
I'm Dear Vargas, and I grew up in New York City, specifically in Spanish Harlem, with my mom, my maternal grandparents, and also my sister. And basically, I experienced a lot of trauma and domestic violence growing up. And for me, I felt like I couldn't be open and honest about what I was experiencing because I felt burdensome. There were so many other things that were going on in my family. I just felt that what I was experiencing was trivial. And so I kept everything to myself. And around the age of 8 was when I started experiencing suicidal ideation. And at the age of 11 is when I actually started acting upon it. And I didn't stop acting upon it until I was 18. And that was when I was hospitalized and placed in a psychiatric ward. I wasn't happy, safe, anything positive. Wherever I was, it was negative. And so that was my form of coping. It wasn't until when I was 18 when I had attempted and my family had no idea. And so for them, it was the first time. When I started high school, I became more aware of how irritable I was, how unhappy I was. I guess initially I thought that was just life and that's just how it went. But I guess as I got older, I just realized that it didn't make any sense. I started going online, looking up words like depression and anxiety and things like that. From there, I just thought, okay, so I think I have depression. But beyond that, I didn't do much when it came to self-advocacy. Going back to that suicide attempt, it was very rough. So I just did it. And when I was hospitalized, it was an eye-opener for me, especially being placed in a psychiatric ward because it was an experience that I never anticipated. After having that really unique and very traumatic experience, I just decided that I didn't want to live at the mercy of my mental illness. I didn't want to feel the way that I had for all of those years. And so from there, I just decided that I was going to start taking medication and start seeing a therapist.
I love how control is this thing that we all strive for, but never fully attain. What haven't I tried to control? My weight. I'm sure you can relate. My relationships. Ask my husband. What other people think of me. Oh, that's a big one. How much sleep I need, the future, the past, any and all outcomes. Control is just like a really elusive thing. We'll get started with Michael DiBiasio.
Control. I've had a long and tenuous relationship with control over most of my life, especially my adult life. I was unconsciously, in all truth, like in this very consistent push and pull relationship with control. I had this, life-changing experience, a near-death experience in so many terms. Interestingly enough, given the environment we're in right now, I contracted an unknown virus that attacked pretty much like every system in my body. And, I got really sick. And, for a couple of days, this is when I was like 21, for a couple of days, it was unclear, like whether my body would like win the battle. I remember being in the ER and probably like in and out of consciousness, like at that first point, waking up and speaking to a doctor and learning that they got some test results that like in particular, like my heart had sustained damage. There were markers that had shown like, I had had a heart attack and they knew I hadn't had a heart attack because I was 21 and I wasn't experiencing other symptoms. So, I got admitted and then that's when like, that day or the next day I was in the ICU and it was like a bunch of sick, old and dying people in the cardiac ICU. And then me at 21 having no idea what the hell was going on. To fast forward a bit from that point, along the theme of control, like up until that point in my life, for sure, and maybe at no point really since, like maybe until becoming a parent, I've never felt so like, out of control as when I, for a couple of days at a young age had to like really consider like, the possibility that I would lose the ultimate form of control, which is, my life.
I'm so grateful to welcome to the Waystation today, Tack Erzinger. Could you tell us your story about discovering your identity?
I really liked to read and was interested in books and literature, and I loved my English teachers, but I could not find characters that had anything to do with me. I mean, of course, these beautiful classics we were reading, amazing curriculums, but not one of them could I relate to. And this is very troubling to me. I think this identity formation we have, we don't think about how it's kind of starts in the school. Of course, it starts at home, but the things around us, the school, the media, the advertising, all those things, they have an impression on young people. And I quite often ask myself today, I was also a teacher in the US in inner city schools for a long time, a lot of Latinx neighborhoods. And I thought, what if we could change it? What if we could change the curriculum? What if we were showing different kinds of characters, more maybe LGBTQ, Latinx, Jewish backgrounds, African American, African? For me, it was quite a negative experience. And it was later on when I started looking at colleges, I went up to Boston. I wanted to get out of the South, and I reconnected with one of my mother's sisters. And she really opened me up to Latinx literature. And I discovered Sandra Cisneros, House on Mango Street, and Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. And suddenly it's like, I know these women, particularly House on Mango Street. It resonated with me. Some of the things that the characters were going through as far as like prejudice, the things they were having to deal with and being confronted with. It's like, even though I wasn't in that area in Chicago, I knew those stories. I knew being the butt of someone's joke, racist joke, prejudice joke, and then laughing it off and thinking, oh, it's just funny. I'm just being funny. And that really had an impact on me and opened me up to a lot of other literature and things that made me feel, hey, actually, I have my place and the place is here and it's okay.
A lot of people talk about resilience these days, and given the past 2 years, there's plenty of stories. I'm really excited to welcome Pablo Agrio. Pablo, whenever you're ready, if you can share your experience and story with us, we are listening.
I was born and raised in Panama. Growing up in my country, I don't think that I heard too much about resilience, but I did hear a lot about you have to be a man, you have to suck it up, men don't cry, you just push forward. My mother decided to send me to the United States to improve my quality of life. When I got here, I discovered that it wasn't as easy as they thought that it would be back in Panama. When I left the Marine Corps, I was a man with a lot of psychological and emotional problems. And the job of becoming a law enforcement officer turned out to be a little bit more than I thought it would be. Imagine 5 days a week, you go to work and you're dealing with nothing but tragedy and horrible situations, and it takes a toll on you. During this time, I met a young woman and I developed a relationship with her. She became pregnant, but the relationship was rocky from the beginning. And before our first year anniversary, tragedy ensued. We got into a situation of domestic violence. I lost my mind and I ended up committing a crime of murder. I was arrested, prosecuted, and sent to prison, and a conviction of murder. My wife was dead, and my son was without his parents. I went to prison, and the only thing that I wanted to do was to kill myself. I couldn't live with the thoughts of what I've done. I couldn't forgive myself. I was in a horrible state of mind. By my continuing interaction with the church, with my spiritual mates, and with other lifers, they all kept telling me, Pablo, you have strong qualities. Things are going to work out. Don't give up, man. Keep fighting. Keep pushing. So I dug deep and I decided that if I really had faith in God and trust in Him, that whatever it is that was happening to me, that, He would not give me more than I could handle, and eventually things would work out. So I picked myself back up again. I began to do groups with the inmates that were also struggling to get parole dates and mentoring and what have you, and just trying to be a leader in the community. I may not have known what resilience was, but I believe that I have that. That's my story.
In 2013, Sheryl Sandberg wrote a book and did a TED Talk about leaning in. The message essentially was, if a woman works hard enough and asserts herself enough, she can thrive at home and at work. Essentially, she can have it all. The book was a huge hit, especially among us women who were feeling the weight and confusion of how to find some semblance of work-life balance. Anyway, the message was applied by millions of women worldwide at work, in their relationships, as mothers, as partners, as employees, as leaders. Basically, we did as women do, which is to go whole hog and try our very best to have it all just by doing more. With a blind eye to the fact that our societal structures were specifically not built for women to succeed easily, and the fact that that success is still very much attained by a privileged few, read white cis males, the responsibility was placed solely on women to have it all and to do it all to get it. What a crock of dangerous bullshit. Note to producers, please mark this episode as explicit. As a woman and self-proclaimed recovering perfectionist, I know all too well that everything is a choice, and every choice is a sacrifice. For example, want to lean into your career and fight like hell to be successful and love what you do? Welcome to your late 30s. You're here, and now your ovarian reserve is depleted and you may not be able to have a child. Clearly that one hit home. So maybe it's not about women working harder and leaning in to make anything and everything in their lives fit, because frankly, doing it all and having it all is a fantasy. In fact, I propose that we lean out a bit more, or maybe a ton more. Being female is a struggle, and the struggle is real. And we can't lean in until society makes some major changes in how we treat women, in the workforce, in our families. The truth is that yes, women deserve to have it all, but the onus shouldn't be placed solely on them to get there. The weight is just too heavy to bear alone. Thank you again for joining us today. As always, you can follow us on Facebook at The Waystation Podcast, on Insta at The Waystation Pod, and on LinkedIn as The Waystation Podcast. Thanks for joining.